Welcome to this month's questions and answers. There were several questions submitted this month related to reincarnation. So I'm going to share a little bit about the Rosicrucian Order's view on reincarnation before we address those questions. A Rosicrucian manuscript states, from a Rosicrucian viewpoint, the aim of humanity is to evolve toward the perfection of its own nature and to reintegrate itself with its spiritual condition. From all evidence, such an aim cannot be attained in a single incarnation. In the 8th Temple degree, there are a number of monographs that discuss reincarnation, especially numbers 11 to 17. So if you're in the 8th Temple degree, you can refer to those. And here is a summary from one of those monographs. Adults do not remember their past incarnations as a general rule because their memory is saturated with events of their present existence and the occurrences which they have witnessed since childhood. As stories authenticated by research and serious investigations attest, young children often remember their previous lives, especially while daydreaming or sleeping. We all possess the potential memory of our past lives and can recall them by stimulating the memory of our subconscious. When a mental image pertaining to one of your past lives emerges, this inner vision can take any number of forms. It may be the face of a person or the faces of many persons. It can be of a landscape, a town, a house, a historical or religious site, or of some other scene or element relating to who you were and where you lived in the distant past. Your last incarnation is most easily remembered since it is the closest to your present life. And in one of those monographs that I mentioned, there is a chart, and it suggested that we consider whether reincarnation makes sense to us or not. Like everything in the Rosicrucian teachings, it's presented to us, and we can decide if that's something that we want to embrace and accept, or if it doesn't make sense to us, maybe we'll research it more, or maybe we'll just decide that we don't agree with whatever that idea is. So in this one monograph in the 8th degree, it presents a chart that says arguments for reincarnation and arguments against reincarnation. So we just add up, does this make sense to us or not? We're also given an experiment that can help us to get in touch with our earliest memories from this life. And for some of us, we can get in touch with memories from the most recent previous incarnation. And here is the technique for this. We practice the overall exercise in which we take deep positive breaths. So we breathe in, we hold our breath while the lungs are full, and we don't hold our breath on the exhalation. And after when we do that, we focus on the energy vibrating from a tiny cell in our left big toe, and then we just move up the body to the top of our head. And again, this is the Rosicrucian overall exercise. And then it's suggested that we intone the vowel sound om, O-M, om, 8 times while we concentrate on the pineal gland in the back of the head. So the pineal gland is at the level of the eyebrows, but it's not on our face, it's in the back of our head. And then we return to normal breathing. And then we recall our immediate past, what happened yesterday and last week and last month, and back to our childhood and the first years of our life. And then we intone the vowel sound Om again, and we open ourselves up to any impressions that we may receive. And again, these impressions may come to us as a face or many faces or sounds, fragrances, could be seeing a place that was important to us in a past incarnation. So we just open ourselves to any impressions we may receive. And this is best done in our sanctums. So we've prepared the space, not just the day we go to our sanctums, but the reason we always use the same space for our mystical work is we build up the vibrations in that place that's only used for our mystical work. We don't do mundane activities in our sanctum. We don't work there. We don't watch TV. We don't search the internet. So we're encouraged to practice this exercise in our sanctum, and especially in front of our mirror. We're instructed very early in the teachings that we set up this sacred space for our mystical work, the sanctum, and we have a mirror. And reflecting upon ourselves in the mirror is an important work for our transformation throughout our Rosicrucian membership. So it's strongly suggested that this exercise is performed in our sanctums. And we're going to do a version of this now. I imagine you're not in your sanctums now. So we're going to practice a version of this. And this way you'll be familiar with the technique if you're not already familiar with it. And take some time to go to your sanctum. After we do this, the more you practice this exercise, the more successful we'll be. So we'll start by taking 3 deep breaths, becoming more relaxed with each exhalation. Now focus on a tiny vibrating cell in your left big toe. Feel its vibrating energy there. Expand your awareness to your entire left foot. Now focus your attention on the energy vibrating in your right big toe. And expand your awareness to your entire right foot. Now, your left lower leg. Your right lower leg. Your left upper leg. Your right upper leg. Now place your attention on the energy vibrating in your hips. Now your abdomen. Your chest. Now focus your attention on the energy vibrating in the fingers on your left hand. Expand your awareness to your entire left hand. Now the fingers on your right hand. Your entire right hand. Your left forearm. Your right forearm. Your left upper arm. Your right upper arm. Now place your attention on the energy vibrating at the base of your spine. As you draw your awareness up your spine, be aware of the energy vibrating in your lower back, your middle back, your upper back, your shoulders, your neck, your jaw, your mouth, your ears, your nose, your eyes, your forehead, the top of your head, now feeling this harmonious energy resonating within your being. Focus on the pineal gland in the back of the head as we intone the vowel sound Om 8 times. Ready? Inhale.
Now, with your eyes closed, recall an important event that happened. Either you experienced it or you witnessed it in the last few days. Now think of something you've experienced or witnessed a few weeks ago. Now, a few months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. Now recall something that you experienced or witnessed 5 years ago or 6 years ago. Now recall something from your adolescence. Now recall something from your childhood. Now recall something that you experienced or witnessed in the first years of your life, 2 or 3 years old or younger. When you feel that you can no longer go back any further in time, concentrate on the last mental image you have seen.
Now, with that earliest image in your mind, we're again going to intone the vowel sound Om 8 times. Ready? Inhale. Now remain receptive and pay attention to any impressions you may receive. Make a mental note of any impressions you may have received. If you have paper handy, just write it down so that you can remember the impression and can meditate on it further. When you're ready, open your eyes and bring your attention back to here and now. So one question that was related to reincarnation, a member says, I sometimes hear talk of so-called star children that claim to have lived previous lives in other star systems, and can't help but wonder if maybe some of us have or will live different lives in other parts of the universe. Or also, how would reincarnation differ if the future humans succeeded in populating other planets besides Earth? What is the Rosicrucian view on reincarnation happening at other locations other than just Earth? Again, the Eighth Temple degree has a number of monographs dedicated to reincarnation. And one states that we could consider if this would make sense when we think about how massive the universe is, that it would only make sense that life exists on other planets. Whether we incarnate there or not, we don't know. But statistically, it just makes sense that there would be life on other planets. And again, we can have that chart of, does this make sense or does it not make sense to me personally? To consider if in a future or in a previous incarnation, we may have incarnated on a different planet. And if so, what would that look like? And the question was related to star children who are considered more advanced than human beings who have reincarnated, or than souls who have reincarnated on Earth alone. Another question related to reincarnation. In the book, AMORC Questions and Answers, it states that many Rosicrucians believe that dogs, cats, and horses who interact with humans throughout their life can cross over the threshold to the human kingdom. For those who share this belief, are there any prayers, meditations, or actions, such as what to do with cremation ashes, to help aid in our beloved service dogs or companions in their transition to return as humans? And in the Eighth Temple degree, there is a meditation that we can perform for our fellow fratres and sorors and loved ones who have gone through transition, where we see the person entering the most beautiful light imaginable, and there's a meditation that goes along with this. And we can do the same meditation for more than humans, for animals who go through transition. And whether this helps them incarnate as a human in a future incarnation, I don't know. And it's something that we can do to help the animal soul move on after being on this plane. Regarding the ashes, the Rosicrucian funeral ceremony states that we return the elements of what was our body that served us while we are alive, that we return that to Earth so that it can continue the alchemical process, the eternal process of life, and that we don't need the elements of the body anymore. So we return those to Earth, and then that provides a foundation for other life, but it's not really related to our incarnation, because it's not our reincarnation. It's not the body that reincarnates. but we return the elements of the body to earth. And again, the Rosicrucian teachings never say, here's what you have to believe. I know some Rosicrucians believe that we have soul personality that continues from life to life. And other Rosicrucians believe that the energy of our soul goes back into like a cosmic soup and then reincarnates without memories and without that development of the soul personality. So it's up to, and some Rosicrucians don't believe in reincarnation. So it's up to everyone to decide for themselves. Our next question is related to the thymus center. Have there been any studies completed by Rosicrucians in the medical or scientific field to determine whether the thymus gland either keeps its relative size in practicing Rosicrucians, who either intone the applicable vowel sounds or are successful in psychic projection, and or in spite of intoning vowel sounds and successful projections, the thymus continues to atrophy in the elderly Rosicrucian population? In other words, after the age of 65, the thymus begins to atrophy, and by 75 years, it is little more than fatty tissue. Is this physiological change in any way affected by Rosicrucian practices? So I am not aware of any Rosicrucian studies on this subject. However, it is mentioned in the monographs that we have psychic counterparts to our entire being, so that we can focus on the center of that's around the thymus gland, which is the thymus center, which is behind the breastbone. And we intone a specific vowel sound that stimulates this psychic center. So whether the thymus gland itself grows or stays the same size, I am not aware of any Rosicrucian studies. After we hit a certain age, the thymus gland becomes smaller in humans and in adults, and it ends up physically being mostly fatty tissue. So the Rosicrucian teachings tell us that during childhood and adolescence, the thymus plays a fundamental role in the development of the immune system. Under its impulse, the physical body generates most of the agents that protect it against illness. Apart from the basic role that it plays in terms of immunity, the thymus secretes thymine, a hormone which is especially active during the period in which the child develops the mental control of the muscles. Although the thymus is much smaller in adults than in children, it should not be thought that it no longer plays any physiological role. The thymus center, the psychic counterpart of the thymus gland, regulates our moods. When its activity is insufficient, the person tends to be cranky or moody. Apart from the influence it exerts on our moods, the thymus center is also the anchor point from which the silver cord stretches out when we project. Furthermore, it is most often in the area of the thymus that the soul is freed from the body at the time of transition. That gives us a lot to think about. So our next question. Many young people that I know have told me that they are not teaching their children any religion or any formal spiritual practices. I'm involved in some of these young people's lives. Are there any Rosicrucian books for children that are published? If not, are there any plans to develop some materials for young children? And what is the status of the committee working on the Child Culture Institute? So we have a very active committee, a team of Rosicrucian members that is preparing lessons for young people. And we plan to release these lessons in 2023. So we are reinstating and Reinvigorating the Junior Order, the lessons for young people. And in the meantime, if these are your children, an adult can share their monographs in a separate sanctum period with their children through the neophyte study. So if you have a child who is interested in what we teach in the Rosicrucian neophyte studies, you can have a sanctum period separate from yours that, and if you have two children, you can, or two or more children, they can be there together and you can study the lessons together. Also, some affiliated bodies offer junior order convocations right now. And the Child Culture Institute is a program that was created by H. Spencer Lewis, and it's for expectant parents and infants. And we have published 3 booklets from the Child Culture series. It was originally published in 3 booklets. We published these online. In the Rosicrucian Digest a few years ago, we had, the theme was Discovering the Rosicrucian Path. And one of the authors described that that her parents had practiced the exercises in the Child Culture series that engaged with and invited her soul into their family. So we're posting in the chat the link. Again, this is the Rosicrucian Digest, and the theme of that digest was Discovering the Rosicrucian Path, and you can view the Child Culture series there. So the 3rd booklet is for infants. It's for really young children, but the first 2 are for parents, expectant parents, to prepare for the birth of their child. And they are just beautiful and inspiring texts and exercises and meditations, and something that we can all benefit from. It's really creating just the purest, sweetest reception for a soul into our family. So I highly recommend the Child Culture Institute, and this is available online. Excuse me. So the next question: having traveled to Rosicrucian Park on several occasions over the years, I am curious about the books that were in Harvey Spencer Lewis's home library. His home used to be across the street from Rosicrucian Park. Are these books now part of the collection at the research library at Rosicrucian Park? H. Spencer Lewis very generously bequeathed his entire library collection to the Rosicrucian Research Library. So in 1939, H. Spencer Lewis's son, Ralph Lewis, was very committed to having a research library that could receive this collection. So Ralph Lewis and his brother Earl, who was an architect, designed the Rosicrucian Research Library, which has been active since 1939, and all of H. Spencer Lewis's books are part of that collection. And this includes, we have first editions of the Rosicrucian Manifestos, the Fama Fraternitatis, the Confessio Fraternitatis, and the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, which were published in 1614, 15, and 16. We have a book called Sybil's Astrology from H. Spencer Lewis's personal collection. It was published in 1788, and H. Spencer Lewis referred to this often. H. Spencer Lewis was an avid astrologer, and Ebenezer Sibley wrote this book, and H. Spencer Lewis's notes are in the margins. And so we have that. We also have this device that H. Spencer Lewis used. It was a piece of furniture, and on the top were these flat brass plates that you would move around in order to create someone's I'm not remembering the word of, when you do an astrology chart, to create their astrology chart. We have the Rosicrucian manual that H. Spencer Lewis wrote, and it's his personal copy, a signed copy. We have his signed copy of the secret symbols of the Rosicrucians of the 16th and 17th century. We have gifts that were given to H. Spencer Lewis from Nicholas Roerich, who was the order's legate in the Himalayas. We have, it's a limited edition set of lithographs from Nicholas Roerich, a gift to H. Spencer Lewis. And Nicholas Roerich also sent some objects from the Himalayas that these are important in Tibetan Buddhism. And we have Elbert Hubbard's books, many first edition books that were sent as gifts to H. Spencer Lewis. So his collection was just extraordinary. Some of these are on display in the rare book. Well, all of the ones I just mentioned are on display in the rare books room at Rosicrucian Park. And if you want to see some of these, you can go to the research library's page online. It's rosicrucianpark.org. So we have our main website, which is rosicrucian.org. And then we have a website for Rosicrucian Park, rosicrucianpark.org. And at the top, there's a tab and it says Research Library. And that's where you can see these books. So this member also says, would H. Spencer Lewis have had any early editions of the work of New Thought writer William Walker Atkinson? During the late 1990s, this author's titles were recommended reading for members and appeared in a leaflet sent out to members among their monographs. And so I looked in the research library. We have many books by William Walker Atkinson, who lived from 1862 to 1932. And he was an American pioneer of the New Thought movement. He wrote a book called The Secret Doctrines of the Rosicrucians under the pseudonym of Magus Incognito. And he probably was the author of the book, The Kybalion. Many of us have read the book, The Kybalion, that says it's by 3 initiates, and it resonates very much with the Rosicrucian teachings. So all of these books were published, they're all first editions, and they were published very early, 1908, 1911. One was 1900, but they were accessioned in the 1950s. When we accept a book, we put the date that it was accessioned. And so that would mean that it was probably Ralph Lewis who collected these books. And then another part of this question is concerns the sanctum of H. Spencer Lewis. Are items including H. Spencer Lewis's sanctum table and mirror now part of the collection at Rosicrucian Park? And there are some archival photos that show H. Spencer Lewis had a sanctum with a black mirror and then another sanctum. We do not have these objects. We have many other objects there. We have many other objects at Rosicrucian Park. And we have his collar that he wore as imperator, his cello that he was a cellist. We have his cello. We have his grand piano. I mentioned we have this astrological device for calculating horoscopes. We have his book plates in the front of, on the inside cover of many books. He received a Chinese chop, a seal. We have his lamp and a globe, conference table and chairs. He had a beautiful clock. It's a little smaller than a grandfather clock. And I've heard these called the grandmother clock before. So we have his clock. We have the Rose Cross that Banks Stacy gave him to complete the founding of the order. And we have all of his original paintings. So we have a lot of items that belong to H. Spencer Lewis, but we do not have his original sanctum. The next question. I've read so much about ascetic masters and teachers who took long fasts as a spiritual path. I've tried fasting many times and for different durations of time. Does our order acknowledge any spiritual value to long fasting? So the Rosicrucian monographs do not suggest any specific diet or fasting. We're encouraged to eat the most pure food, to drink the purest water, but we can consider whether vegetarianism is right for us, but like everything else, we're encouraged to make our own decision, but there's no information about suggesting a fast. However, in the TMO monographs, it is suggested that we fast once a month. And many Rosicrucians and Martinists choose not to eat right before an initiation, whether we're receiving the initiation or conferring it. And there are so many reasons that this is valuable. First of all, when we fast, it boosts our cognitive performance. And when our ancestors were hungry, they produced fat. Well, we do too. They burned fat, which produced ketones. And this created mental focus, including deepening our mystical experiences. Because if someone hasn't eaten for a while, and a long time ago, our ancestors were trying to find food, it's helpful to them that their mental focus would increase because you needed to focus on getting food. So as part of evolution, fasting helps create mental clarity. Fasting also triggers autophagia, which I'm going to share a description of that by Dr. Louisa Petri. It's an evolutionary self-preservation mechanism. This is what autophagia is, through which the body can remove dysfunctional cells, including precancerous cells, and recycle parts of them towards cellular repair and cleaning. So when we fast, it triggers this, our body eats certain cells. It eats weak cells, including precancerous cells. And then the parts of those are used towards cellular repair and cleaning. So it's good for us to fast. And if this is something that you choose to do, talk to your healthcare professional, let them know why you want to fast, and they can give you good advice. There are so many resources online about fasting. And in the 2019 issue of the Rosicrucian Digest on Radiant Health, I mentioned intermittent fasting in an article on Radiant Health. And this is where we fast for 16 hours a day. And it's not as hard as it sounds, because that includes the time that we sleep. And often I will not eat after 7 p.m. and then 16 hours later is 11 o'clock in the morning. So part of that time is sleeping, and I often don't eat breakfast. And this provides those benefits of fasting that I mentioned. But always check with your healthcare professional and see if this is something that feels right to you. But extreme fasting or extreme anything is not recommended in the Rosicrucian teachings. The next question is, I have recently been diagnosed with osteoporosis and wondered which Rosicrucian techniques would be helpful to build bone density. I've been using the vowel sound tho, T-H-O. How often, how many times would you recommend doing this? Are there other techniques? So tho most definitely helps anything to do with the bones. I've mentioned before that tho, intoning the vowel sound tho, helped to heal a bone fracture that I had, and it helps strengthen the bones. And there are many practices that can help with osteoporosis. Again, check with your healthcare professional. Many current guidance suggests that there are a few things that we can do, just a handful of things that contribute greatly to our health and well-being. And one of these is walking 10,000 steps per day. And it's easy to get a Garmin or some kind of a device that can count your steps. And a lot of researchers are saying if there's just one thing that you did to improve your health, it would be walking 10,000 steps a day, which I try to do every single day. And also climbing stairs. If you have a choice between taking an elevator and climbing stairs, it's helpful to do. These techniques, again, if you have osteoporosis, you'd want to check with your healthcare professional, and they'll tell you that weight-bearing exercises and resistance, that's very important without overdoing. So often it's recommended that first thing in the morning and last thing in the day, you jump up and down 20 times. So it's a very simple exercise, but it depends on the advancement of whatever condition you might have. And it's also recommended to get more sleep than 6 hours per night. If you have a challenge with osteoporosis and you're not sleeping more than 6 hours a night, it's suggested to get more sleep, and there are certain vitamins that can help as well. Okay, so our next question is, the Rosicrucian teachings have transformed my life for the better, and I pray that may the divine essence continue to strengthen and empower you each day. So mote it be. Thank you. Could you please tell me the best way to overcome attacks of witchcraft? And this member writes, after joining the order and performing all the sanctum attunements at home, I noticed a decline in attacks on me, and my ability to carry out day-to-day activities got much better. I became more peaceful and calm most of the time. To shed more light on my background, my families and all my generations had been spiritualists, or witch doctors as they are called in Nigeria, and I used to assist my late father in his spiritual work when I was a teenager, and as I grew older, I lost interest and focus on the same work. So there are several practices for protection in the Rosicrucian Order. One is introduced in the first temple degree initiation, and it can be used anytime we're in distress. And there are other practices throughout the teachings for personal protection. All right, the next question is about Alice Bailey's work. And it says, Alice Bailey's work claims that besides individuals having destinies governed by karma, that planets also have to work through their individual karma. The same applies to nations on Earth that have destinies that their karma has affected based on their actions in the past on Earth. Do the Rosicrucians subscribe to a similar doctrine? And the monographs do state that our planet has a karma and that every nation has a karma, and that the actions of the people of nations affect the future that that nation will have. It also asks about, can you comment about the relationship that H. Spencer Lewis may have had with Alice Bailey and her sister and with Helena Blavatsky? And so I was not able to find any connection between H. Spencer Lewis and Alice Bailey, who was a mystic and an author. To my knowledge, she was not a Rosicrucian. However, H. Spencer Lewis wrote about, she's often called Madame Blavatsky. She was the co-founder of the Theosophical Society. And in the Mystic Triangle from May 1929, here's what H. Spencer Lewis wrote. Now, Madame Blavatsky died when H. Spencer Lewis was a child. So my understanding is that their paths did not cross. So H. Spencer Lewis wrote, while on my trip to Egypt and through Europe, During the past few months, I had an opportunity to contact many persons still living who were intimately associated with Madame Blavatsky during the years of her great work. Then it continues. Certainly, Madame Blavatsky had a wonderful soul, and her heart was as big, as kind, and lovable as any woman known in history. It continues. Madame Blavatsky had so many intimate contacts with the masters Kutumi and Master Moria. And so this is what H. Spencer Lewis wrote, but they lived at different, he was a child when she died. And in the book Rosicrucian History and Mysteries, Christian Rabis wrote, when they were choosing a name for their organization, Madame Blavatsky and Colonel Alcott considered many, including that of Rosicrucian. Finally, in September 1875, they settled upon the choice of Theosophical Society. However, the Theosophical Society had little to do with Rosicrucianism, but instead promoted an esoteric Buddhism. However, it was from the Theosophical Society that some other Rosicrucian groups drew their inspiration. Not the Rosicrucian Order, AMORC, but two others. Okay, so the next question. What should be a typical Rosicrucian's day? In other words, what is the daily life recommended for practicing Rosicrucians? Each member decides this for themselves, and we have the Rosicrucian Code of Life with 22 suggestions for living a harmonious life. And the very first one says, in the morning, before rising, thank the God of your heart for the new day that you are privileged to live on the earthly plane, and ask the divine to inspire you throughout the day. Then, standing facing the east, take 7 deep breaths as you focus on the vitality that is awakening in you. Afterwards, drink a glass of water and then begin your daily activities. And we created a video with images to go along with the Code of Life. And we've got that in the chat. Thank you, Karen, for posting that. So it's an 11-minute video. It's really a nice video. So if you want to watch that, you're welcome to. And it's just a way of starting the day right and considering what direction your day wants to go, how you want your day to go. And what's important along with that is that you don't create so many practices in the morning that it becomes overwhelming and then you don't do any of them. You know, you're thinking, I can't do all this, I have to get to work, or I have to do something with my kids. So find what works for you, and the Rosicrucian Code of Life provides a very simple way for beginning our day. And then the last thing before we close, last month, we had a question about what causes frightening dreams in children. And Frater Dave, who regularly participates in our Zoom teleconferences, he's a clinical psychologist, and he sent me an email afterwards and said, clinically, I find that much more than half of the time, so-called bad dreams are the result of simply being overheated while sleeping. Like in a fever state, a body that is covered with too many blankets or bedclothes can produce such dreams. In the office, the first order of business is to make sure that these dreams are not the result of this physical cause, often to the relief of the patient. After ruling out overheating, a dream can be clarified or interpreted by the usual methods, such as relevance to an occurrence the previous day. All right, so we got to all of our questions. Thank you so much for sending those questions in. We present the questions and answers every month, so we'll have an opportunity again next month.